Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
It's The In Show, Australia's only show dedicated to innovation from Adelaide, Australia and across the globe.
Hi, it's Troy Sincock and David Grice. Once again, we are talking innovation because on The In Show, David, that is what we do.
We absolutely do. And I love the stories we're uncovering. I love the people we're finding out about, and I love hearing about their stories and their journeys right through from start to finish.
We've been doing this for half a year now, and it really has been extraordinary how much people give of themselves to try and make our world that little bit better.
I love the passion that they have too. So many of them just say they do this because they want to make the world a better place. And that's just inspirational just on its own.
And what they put on the line to achieve, it's extraordinary. Now, this woman is no different. It's Melissa Cooper, a UX or user experience strategist. She's got 15 years experience and she's done it all from designing user experiences for large online publishers, including Fairfax Digital, ABC's Innovation Unit, news.com.au. And after work with Eventbrite, she is now back in Australia following a 6-year stint in San Francisco. So what was the highlight of the last 6 years, Melissa?
Oh, I don't know if you could pick one thing out. I think when I went over quite bright-eyed and a bit naive, really, as I'm sure you can imagine, it was around... I interviewed at the end of 2010 and arrived there in February of 2011, and it was kind of, there were obviously really big things happening in the kind of second wave at that point, but it was really just probably the beginnings in what we're seeing out there today. So it was great to be on that curve and to arrive in the valley. And for me, particularly, it's something that I wanted to do because it was like an adventure, but also just my passion for digital businesses and technology and user experience, and sort of go and kind of put myself in the mecca of what that is for people who really enjoy doing those things as I do. So I think that what I really love about user experience, which is definitely the highlight of being there, is just that you're always tackling new problems. Technology is always evolving really, really quickly and rapidly. And so, most of the time, none of us kind of entirely know what we're doing, but we've got a lot of experience to leverage off to make some really good decisions and just keep a good close eye on everything and iterate from there. So for me, definitely a highlight is big learning curves, but that's sort of very much about why I'm into user experience and working on technology businesses as well. So yeah, it was a very accelerated period, I'd say, for that reason, because it is a very busy, happening environment to be in for those things.
Can you explain to us what is a user experience? Because a lot of our listeners probably don't understand the term UX, and those that are involved in technology do. But perhaps could you just let us know what is involved in what the user experience is all about?
Yeah, I have a couple of different answers for this one, depending on who I'm talking to. In a way, I think that, if from the answer from my grandma is I make blueprints for websites, but that's very, very simplistic version. So think of user experience as a design discipline, but more like solution design rather than brand or visual elements. Typically, a process for me would look like we've got a goal or a problem or a challenge. I'll do a bit of research around that. I'll go out and find out about how the people who are going to use the product think about what it is that we're trying to achieve, and then actually come up with a workflow or a solution that meets those user needs. And so I think really at the centre of it is that user-centred objective in terms of a way of inventing what a feature or a product is going to look like and feel like. And so ultimately the user experience is what a person encounters, experiences, thinks, feels, questions when they come to an interface to use it.
And can I ask about the research that you do in that area? Because, is it enough for you to just jump on the platform yourself and, kind of run through from A to Z and go, it was a bit tough? Or, how much scrutiny do you give that? And, how many people do you talk to? And what makes you go, okay, I got it, this is how I can improve things?
In terms of saying before, there's a vast variety of experiences, and so there's always prior learnings and knowledge that you can lend to things. And also, quite often there are clear usability issues. I think when it comes to the way somebody expects a pull menu to work or something like that, those standards are really well established now. 15 years ago at the beginning beginning of my career, they probably weren't, and we did spend more time finicking over the details. But really, so there's a lot we can do when looking at something from a fresh perspective, as you know, like an expert review or whatnot. But the benefit of actually sitting next to a customer and is looking at it through their eyes, and so particularly when you've been designing an interface, it's kind of like it's that you can kind of regain the fresh eyes perspective. So when you're designing, you get really close and you get nutty into the details, and as soon as you put it next to someone else and just kind of keep quiet and ask, and just sort of say, what's your first impression and what are you thinking, what do you want to do, then you get a really new insight into what it is that you've been creating, and you can do that really, really quickly. And so from a numbers perspective, that's interesting because that question comes up a lot. Nielsen Norman Group, which are sort of 4 founders in the field, did some studies and identified that basically after you've spoken to 5 people, like in a user testing scenario, you sort of have diminishing returns. So, and I find in my experience when it's user testing that, you sit down with one person and you'll be like, oh, wow. And then you'll sit down with 2 people and you'll be like, wow, that's different. And then the third person will start to confirm things, and by the time you get to the 5th person, you've sort of got your patterns. You're starting to hear things over and over again. And I think it's kind of when you sort of have those like aha moments through that you can keep moving forward. So the idea is to test more frequently. And so, and maybe then again with different user types as well. So you could do, if we refer to Eventbrite, we've got sort of the buyer and the seller side of the market. So I could be building a feature that affects both customer bases, and I might decide that I'm going to start with the event organisers first and run my concept by them, update it, and then take it to the attendees, and kind of continue from there. So it's sort of an iterative process in that way as well.
Gotcha.
So speaking of Eventbrite, how on earth did you get involved?
Yeah, I was in Sydney working for News at the time, and I'd been in Sydney in the media doing UX for Fairfax ABC News. I'm kind of really into how news is created at the time, and I sort of was starting to feel a bit like a change, and I kind of had this moment where I was like, oh, why not maybe just go to Mecca. And so I decided that what I would do first was go for a holiday. And so I went for a holiday, and Eventbrite was one of the brands at the time that I knew because I've been to plenty of tech events in Sydney, via the platform. And I got out there and I was fortunate enough to interview. Went through 3 rigorous rounds and met a bunch of people in the organisation and the founders. And at that time, they were actually pretty surprised that this Australian from, the other side of the world had even heard of them. And I was like, what are you talking about? Everyone uses Eventbrite in Australia. And it wasn't long after that we sort of started with a global strategy. And as it turns out, Australia was one of the fastest growing places organically when they looked into it. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, what was your perception of, being in amongst Silicon Valley and all that sort of represents versus the actual reality of it? Did the 2 things match up?
People in the Valley and we're just like, have you seen that HBO show Silicon Valley? It is frighteningly accurate. Right. It is insanely on point. But at this, and great use of humour. But at the same time, when you're there, you do have access to go and see some of the world leaders speak at Yelp for free or whatever. And you do that from time to time, but you're just so busy, really, really heads down in that startup culture. It's like one of the things that I really loved about it that was very immediate to me is that the entire team or the entire company is encouraged to treat the business as if it's their own. So it's not like, oh, these are your tasks and you need to go ahead and do this or that. It's like, here's the stats, this is your objective, what are you going to do? And so, you just really knuckle down and get obsessed with what it is that you're working on. And so I think probably one of the things that I expected was probably to get around and meet different people in different companies and listen to, be part of all of that thing external from the company. And it's probably, it did some of that, but I think looking back, I wish I did more. But then at the same time, I was just doing so much growing in this team and learning from these people that I was sitting right next to at the time. Yeah.
So how did you actually get started? Was it this kind of design something that interested you way back, or is it something that you grew into? And sort of explain to us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, it's something that I grew into, and I think that anybody who's been at it for 10, 15 or even 20 years is probably like, I started doing this thing and we didn't know what it was called. Like there really wasn't sort of a discipline for that back then. My own story was that I sort of was interested in filmmaking and made films, and so I studied that, and I took minors in digital media and made some CD-ROMs, which is always fun to think. You're a member director. And yeah, so I think it was like first year uni when actually like HTML was a new subject that you could do, and it seemed kind of really hard, which is kind of hilarious now. But for me, I think I kind of shifted from film to digital media because it's something that I could always be doing. Film's something you do a lot of thinking and planning, and it just kind of suited my temperament more as an individual. But I think in the software industry and in the tech business industry, it sort of evolved out of people struggling with building things that nobody wanted or that didn't fit the purpose, and then having to go back and rebuild and the costs associated with that. So I think one of the main benefits of user experience, where sometimes if you're not familiar with the methodology, it might feel like, oh, well, we've got to do a couple of weeks worth of work up front before we even get started, and it's not true like at all, but it will save you time down the track. The reassurance amongst the team and the confirmation that you're actually building something that people want, you're often able to figure out that this thing that would have cost a lot of engineering time doesn't actually add a lot of value, that sort of thing. And so it kind of really came out of that need. I was a bit of a jack of all trades in my early days, and I just grew more and more attracted to that side of things. And then that's when I went over to Sydney and did my master's and majored in interaction design.
And what had you come back?
Yeah, I came back because it was time to return to Australia for me, really, I think. And having lived in Sydney for 8 or 9 years, but then been gone for 5, I wasn't necessarily sure where to land. So it made sense to come back and be with the family for a while and check out this place again. It's actually, it'd been 15 years since I lived in Adelaide, and I'm really loving being back. It's sort of a lot's changed, and last time I lived here, I didn't really have any money. Now I actually can go to a wine bar. So I do different things here than I used to, but it still has that really like a homely, easygoing feel about it. Yeah.
So obviously the user experience, I'm just back there in my thinking at the moment, and this is something that really is only kind of been something that I've started thinking about in recent years, and it's one of those things that sort of is an outpouring of where technology's actually taken us, isn't it? Because gone are the days where, in the traditional websites you'd be clicking here, clicking there, clicking there, clicking there, and then getting the information. It's all about a 1 or 2 click now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think it used to be about putting up with what you could get, and that's, I think, one of the interesting things about where design's at currently. We're really at a tipping point, because it's really clear that as technology's easier to build, and faster to build, the competitive edge really is in the experience. And so there's a lot of people talking about that at the moment, and there's a lot of awareness that's being felt in the upper tiers of companies that previously might have thought design was this kind of like fudgy, smudgy kind of thing that was very subjective and whatnot. So, yeah, I think that customers have more choice than ever before. And with that choice comes like, do I like this? And then do I love this? And am I going to come back to this? And so those are the challenges that companies are facing now, because if you don't have customers, you don't have a business.
I can really relate to it, having worked in radio for 25 years or so, and you just know, from a listener's point of view, you don't have to do too much wrong to have them go, don't like this song, I'm going to tune into another radio station, find another song I like right now, and then you could potentially lose them forever based on whatever experience the other radio station's offering. It seems that, as David said, one extra click of the mouse and you could be out of there, going to another like-minded product, given that the market is full of so many similar things. Can you paint the picture of what is an excellent user experience? Is there some key ingredients you're trying to achieve whenever you tackle these problems?
There's so much involved, really, because, you can make the best product in the world and nobody can find it, so you failed. One of the things that was sort of interesting challenge about Eventbrite is that you sort of, for most people, they think about it as an events platform and their experience in life is as an attendee. And so how does it work in terms of finding an event and getting a ticket and going to the door and scanning that ticket? But really the experience challenge of that business to be successful is also the at-the-door experience. Like, events fail if you can't get 50,000 people through into a festival in a reasonable time frame. And then certainly up on the front end, the event organisers, some of those are doing free networking events, some are running 50,000 people festivals, and that's their business. And reporting is really important, and if you can't deliver against those business objectives, then they're not going to return to you or use you. So at the end of the day, in my experience, there's always way too many ideas than you can tackle. And so one of the hardest parts is really prioritising and iterating and just using your best judgment, because you're going to know heaps more than you did 6 months ago in 6 months' time as well. And technology is going to evolve as well. So it is a real balancing act.
And is what you do, does it continue to evolve? Like, so once you've just delivered the first for the launch of the website or the product, do you then come back again in a month or 2 months, revisit, then rework, then change again? Is it something like that continues to evolve over time, or is it sort of once you've done it, that's...
You're never done. It's definitely, once you're putting your best foot forward throughout the whole process and getting validation throughout. But certainly once you launch, you need to watch those numbers. And based on those numbers, you could learn that you're having some great successes and that provides inspiring ideas to double down on. Or you could learn that something just, wasn't quite what you thought it would be, and you need to kind of figure out why and fix it. And then based on that, you sort of have to weigh that against the things that you were planning on doing next. So is this next thing going to be more important than double downing on the success you've just had, or, how are you going to play that out? And I think that's where it gets a bit tricky, because, again, there's just so much that, when you're really sort of neck deep into a product and you know your customers really well, you've got lots of ideas. And so what's really going to shift the business?
And what sort of numbers are you looking at when you talked about the numbers there?
Yeah, certainly looking at sales, user growth, web analytics. I always try and keep A/B testing running as well.
What do you mean by that, A/B testing?
A/B test is where you serve a different experience to the control. So that you've got your variant A and your variant B. So usually there could be optimization tweaks. And if you're making that in the cart, you can only really run one at a time. But that's where what you're looking for is making a small tweak that might shift the conversion by 1%, and 1% in e-commerce is huge, right? So you just want to always keep one of those going, so you're experimenting and learning. Yeah.
What we love about people we've spoken to on this show about innovation is people's willingness to share failures, epic failures. Has it been? Do you have a story that comes to mind where you just couldn't make something work?
I have to give me a sec. I'm sure there's something.
Yeah, that's all right.
Because I think, one of the things that I think is really interesting is because failure is sort of a trendy thing in the industry, but I think that while it's a bit of a catch cry or a phrase that draws people to it, what it's really about is experimenting and innovating. So I think, have we released things that didn't go as planned? Sure, of course, but again, back to the previous points, you're sort of always watching what's happening, and, small changes can make a big impact. So I don't really walk away from those experiences feeling like, oh, God, that was an epic failure. But more so, we now know how to make that better. We've learnt. And so I think that when you talk about failure and people talk about, like, if you're not failing, you're not doing it, you're not take enough risk. They're talking really about learning, I believe. Yeah.
Well, Melissa, thanks so much. It's been great having the opportunity to speak to you on the in-show UX or user experience strategist, Melissa Cooper. Thanks.
Thank you. It's been great. Thanks for having me.
It's David Grice and Troy Sincock on The In Show. You can subscribe to the show at iTunes and rate us 5 stars if you like. Now, tomorrow, David, we're going to find out what's in.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing more from other innovators about, what they're seeing as the emerging technologies and all that sort of thing. And I just can't wait to hear what we unveil tomorrow.
It's incredible because when we ask this question, so often people look outside their own industries and we see on the horizon all these things that are coming that are going to revolutionise the way we live.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see how some common threads are coming through as well. The autonomous vehicles, the driverless cars and flying cars and all these other things around Internet of Things. It's just really, really fascinating to see where our world's going to go.
Check it out tomorrow on the In Show podcast.
The In Show Interview. Brought to you by Adelaide Smart City Studio. Subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes. A Dave and the Beanstalk production.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.